Kay is sharing with us as well. Okay. All right. Sorry. It's Bates from
Hi,
Gerline,
babe.
Hong Kong. Okay, Robin, I think you should introduce your friends.
Bates was just, we were together a few weeks ago in a session I ran in Hong Kong. And obviously, she didn't get enough because she's crazy enough to want more.
Right. Okay, good. Welcome. Thank you for calling in. And Kay says that you're in the transformation stage as well. So you're curious about crafting people strategies. Yeah, and how that would help the transformation. Okay, that's great. Thank you, Kay. And Bates, no worries. You can just listen to us and you can chat, as in type into the chat box. You don't need to talk. You don't need to talk.
Wendy, it's a couple of minutes past. Shall we kick off? Because one of the
Yes,
things about is being on time.
sure. Okay. Well, I just want to say thank you to all of you for making time for today's webinar. Right, I'm very happy to do this together with Robin. Robin's been my mentor for the past several years, right? And so he's written many books on implementation. And so we'll hear from him about his latest book, right? Excellence in Execution. And just before we get started, right, I just want to orientate all of us to this platform, right? So for first thing, please mute yourself when you're not speaking, and you can turn off the video as well. Of course, along the way, if you've got questions, you've got comments, feel free to unmute yourself and turn on your video as well, right? And there is a more button. If you look at your control panel, there's more. If you click on it, you would find that there are some interactive buttons like to raise your hand or to give us an applause, right? So can I invite all of you to do just that? Go to the more button on your control panel, right? And then to raise your hands to tell us that okay. Thank you, Kay. Thank you, Min. Right, you see more button. I have a clap button as well. Right, thank you. Balaji and Bates, you found it? And Erwin, yeah? Okay, good. So the reason for doing this is to give us feedback along the way. Feel free to, if you've got a comment, raise your hands or to give us an applause, right? Okay, so these are the interactive buttons. And very importantly as well is the chat, right? So we've been doing this already. So Mins, I think you've just come in. So I encourage you to let us know who you are, what brought you here today, right? So again, feel free to ask questions along the way in the chat group. All right, so with that, I think we're ready to start, right? So Robin's going to talk to us about the challenges of executing strategy in today's turbulent business market, right? And he has written his book, Excellence in Execution, and today is actually this is actually his fourth book, right? So Robin is a global pioneer and expert in strategy implementation, right? He's the founder and CEO of Bridges Business Consultancy International, and also the creator of Implementation Hub. Right, so this is if some of you do not know yet, it's a first portal in the world dedicated to strategy implementation, featuring over 500 resources. So do check it out after today. And so he has written a lot. So some of his books include Breaks the Bridges, Make Your Strategy Come Alive, which set the benchmark for new thinking in this field. And Beyond Strategy is about the leader's role in successful implementation, right? So, and then he has another book on building execution plan, right? So today we are very happy for him to share with us about excellence in execution, how to implement strategy. Okay, so right, Robin, you need to say your message to everyone is sent to me privately.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. No worries. Keep
Yeah.
going.
Yeah, and so for some of you who do not know me, my name is Wendy, and I'm the founding partner of Flame Center. And I am a speaker and a consultant in the talent development and engagement area. And this is a book that I wrote, Wholeness in a Disruptive World. Right, Robin and I kind of like raced each other to the finishing line. Right, so that's about me. And so in today's session, right, it's going to be interactive. We'll be having a conversation, having Robin share, and feel free to keep your questions going. And right, and Mint says Mint is from People Potential, interested to find out about strategy implementation. Thank you and welcome. Right, okay. So strategy implementation is one of the newer areas. Like strategy formulation has been around for a much longer time, right? But in terms of implementation, as you rightly pointed out in your book, right, that people search more for strategy rather than implementation, right? And we know that if you just have strategy without implementation, it's not going to work. So I'm curious, Robin, from your experience, what percentage of strategy implementation fails?
Thank you, Wendy, and wonderful introduction. You did very well. So welcome, everyone. Lovely to spend the hour with you. To answer your question, what percentage of strategy implementations fail? The challenge is that 2/3 of implementations are failing. Okay, sorry, just here we go. There we go. 2/3 of implementations are failing. It's an horrendous failure rate. It means 67% of all our efforts put into strategy are not delivering the outcomes. And when I say failing, the way we measure that is we put the pass mark at 50%. So we ask organizations, what is their strategy objectives? What are their measures? What is their timeline? And then we go back in after they finished on that timeline to say, how much did you achieve? And 2/3 are failing. But it's not all bad news. We are getting better. So the good news is that we have seen a positive trend in improvements. And over the last few years, you can see from the slide, Wendy, I think you're going to have to control. There we go. It's one too many. Can you go back one?
Yeah.
There we go.
Got it.
You can see from the slide that we are getting better implementation. When I first started doing the research, Wendy, back in 2000, 2002, we published the results that 90% were failing, which was the same as Kaplan and Norton were seeing in America at the time. You can then see a steady trend from other research. And just last year, we published our latest research that showed the 67% failure. So the good news is we're getting better. The bad news is we still have to do something different because we're failing more often than succeeding.
So I'm curious, just to back it up a little bit, when we say that organizations are failing, what tells us that the strategy is failing or that the implementation is failing?
So there are many different things along the way. The most important is having the tracking and measuring in place, so you can tell every week, every month, or even every day how we're progressing. So it's having in play the right tracking and measuring that will know how you're doing. But at the end of the day, you only know when a strategy is successfully executed, whether it was a good or a bad strategy. And what do I mean by this statement? Everyone thinks their strategy is good at the beginning. Nobody goes into the conference room and says, let's come up with a bad strategy. Everyone thinks it's a good one. But you only know how good it is once you start to execute it. Also, only when it's well executed do your customers notice the difference. Customers may hear about your strategy, but they notice the execution. So it's critical and more important than ever that we get the execution right. And also, when you fail in your implementation, it's the customer who also suffers. And thirdly, and finally, only when the execution succeeds do you really positively impact shareholder value. When strategy succeeds, the payoff is tremendous. But part of the reason it's so tremendous is because more people fail than succeed. So when you get it right, the payoff is wonderful and impacts your shareholder.
Right, right. Yeah. So it's not the competitive advantage is not just having a good strategy, but having that strategy well implemented.
You got it.
Okay, right. So yeah, so in today, and we want to talk about about the shortening life cycle of both companies and strategies. But what is the impact of that on organizations?
So not only will we, just to cover for everyone else so they know what the agenda is, not only will I answer your question in a moment about the shortening life cycles, but we'll also discuss what it takes to achieve excellence in execution, and I'll share 3 steps from our research. Number 3, how to engage your people in executing strategy. Wendy and I would both like to share, because this is an area where Wendy does a lot of work. So we're both going to share what we see it takes to get higher engagement. And, we're embarrassed to say that Singapore has one of the worst engagement areas in Asia. So we'll talk about that a bit. And number 4, we'll conclude today with a question I hear a lot, which is, should you include your employees in crafting the strategy? Or should you do it on your own? So these are the 4. But to answer your question about what's the impact of shortening life cycles, it's ironic today that our organizations are built to be stable, but they must keep changing. Now just pause and think about that. We're constantly building our organization to have the structure, the systems, the standards, to maintain the way we work, to be stable. But we're living at a time of constant transformation, and we have to keep changing. We all know the Kodak story. We all know how Kodak went out of business. They introduced digital photography, but put it in the shelf because they didn't want to lose their revenue from film. But do we learn from what happened to Kodak to avoid it happening to us? And here's the big challenge, Wendy, that we see today. In the 1950s, the average tenure of a company on the Standard & Poor's Index was 67 years. Today, what's the average life of a company? Well, the challenge is it's now 17 years. In other words, for over the last 50 years, every year, the average life of a company is dropped by 1 year per year. And today, the average is just 17 years, which is even more worrying for bridges because we just turned 17 last week. So we've hit the average now.
Yeah, but you are the implementation expert.
So we should last a bit longer than the others.
Yes.
52% of the Fortune 500 firms since 2000 are now gone. And when we say gone, just not out of business, but also it means, sorry, we just lost, there we go, we're back. Not only are they out of business, okay, but it means they've either been merged or they've been combined. Also, if we look at the Fortune 500, the average life of a company today is just Sorry, we're having some technical issues at the moment. See if we can go back. The average life of a company is just 14 years. Okay. Sorry, I don't know why we're having the technical issue right now. But this means that there are 4 main challenges that are happening. Sorry, just give me one moment. Let's see if we can adjust this. There we go. It's a bit better. Sorry, just bear with me one sec. My apologies for the technical there. We're back. So here's the message. There are 4 main challenges because of those shortening strategy cycles. The first one is that leaders today have to create new strategies more frequently than ever before. If the company only lasts 17 years, the challenge is to keep creating new strategies even more frequently. And because they have to create new strategies even more frequently, they therefore have to implement even more frequently, which is good news for us because that's what we help them do, but not for leaders. Because the big challenge for leaders is they've been taught how to plan, but not how to execute. Just think about in university, everyone has a strategy professor on a business program, but very few how to implement. So very few leaders today have that skill. Number 3, many people today are suffering from change fatigue. A lot of organizations we consult to, the leaders say, but my people are so tired. What's the solution? The answer, get comfortable with it. We're just going to be changing more and more than ever before. And number 4, what is the key message? Is because we're changing so quickly today, you have to abandon yesterday. We can no longer assume that just because something was successful yesterday, it will be successful for tomorrow. So we have to let go of the old way of doing things and look at new ways. We have to abandon yesterday. We can no longer assume that yesterday's success will be tomorrow's success.
Sure. This sounds like a paradox. It's like people want stability, they want predictability, and we are always changing, always transforming. And now you talk about abandoning just yesterday, right? So this is a huge challenge, I would imagine.
It is, and the biggest challenge starts with the mindset of leaders. Instead of just, carrying over from last year and managing for inflation, they have to rethink their whole business model.
Right.
So really start with the leaders.
Yeah, maybe let's also hear from our participants, like in terms, which is the, the 4 impact that Robin talked about, which is the most relevant for you in your organization? Can I invite all of you to just indicate what is it that hits you the most? Is it about the need to formulate new strategy quickly, or is it the need to implement very quickly? This whole change fatigue that Robin talked about, and this need to abandon yesterday. Right? Let's hear from all of you on what is it that hits your organization most. We're just going to pause here for about 30 seconds so that all of you have a chance. Yeah, and Balaji says it's the frequent change in strategy, right? That is most impactful for your organization. Balaji, maybe you can also put it on the vote so that we can also see on the whole. Okay, another 10 seconds. Okay, has everybody put in your votes? Okay, now I'm going to end the vote and the poll, and I'm going to share the results with you. Okay, so you can see, you're now seeing the poll results. It looks like very evenly distributed. Is this consistent with your experience, Robin?
Well, I wouldn't use that because we have a very small number in the vote, so I wouldn't draw any conclusions from it.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So it sounds like evenly spread that amongst a few of us here, we talk about the need to formulate new strategy to change fatigue, and the need to abandon yesterday. It sounds like these are some of the ones amongst this group, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Thank you for doing.
yeah. So with that, right? So, given that we need to, formulate new strategies quickly and implement quickly and deal with change fatigue, as well as, having people to have new ways, like you talk about change of mindset. So we're also curious to hear from all of you. In your opinion, what is the top reason for implementation failure in the clients that you work with, or in your organization, or the people that you are exposed to? What do you think would be the top reason that strategy implementation fails?
So just to add on, what we're asking everyone to do is in the chat box, just share from your experience, just what you consider the one top reason for implementation failure from either your past experience or what you've seen in other organizations.
Yeah, and Bates says, like, leaders do not think implementation is important. Yeah, I think this echoes the thought about we focus on strategy formulation, right, and not so much on the implementation. And Aaron talks about intransient culture. Maybe if you could say a little bit more about that. And Balaji talks about time taken to implement never seems complete. I think I can. Yeah, it seems like before we finish one implementation or one strategy implementation, we already move on to the next one, right? Okay. And Kay says, I think because people are resistant to change and unsure if the strategy would work and would be worthwhile, whether they should bother and try to do things differently, right? Yeah, I think that's a key one, which Robin will talk about. And Min's talk about resource limitations. Yeah, certainly. Given that we have limited resource, how do we allocate the resources for all the different initiatives, right? Yeah, Robin, your thoughts to these responses?
So what we see is consistent in that every organization, for different reasons, implementation fails. And I cringe when I see an article that says the top 3 reasons implementation fails, because in every organization it's different. So the challenge is to find out what works in your organization and what doesn't.
Right. So I guess then that brings us to this question, right? What does it take to achieve excellence in execution? And as you mentioned, is to find out what works in your organization versus like trying to take a template and necessarily implement everything, but having the judgment on what does it take to be excellent in your organization. Could you share with us more about this?
Thank you, Wendy. So my new book, which Wendy was kind enough to introduce, Excellence in Execution, I launched it in May. You got a point for that one. I launched it in May, and it took me 3 years to write the book. So it's taken me longer to write Excellence in Execution than all my other books combined. This is my 5th book. So the challenge is, finding out what really works in companies. And Excellence in Execution is the how-to, provide you the tools, the tips, and the techniques to be able to have the right mindset, skill set, and tool set. So when I was doing the research, part of my challenge was that most leaders struggle to take strategy from the big picture and translate it into the day-to-day organization. And this is the question I get asked, probably the most frequently. How, Robin, do we take the big picture strategy and inculcate it to the day-to-day business. So that's what I'd like to share with you now. We discovered in our research that there are 3 broad themes. These are consistent in companies who are successful. So we shared right at the beginning, 2/3 of implementations fail. 1/3 succeed. So we studied the 1/3 who were successful, and from that pattern, we identified these 3. First, naturally, you have to create awareness. You look at me and you go, of course, Robin. But 95% of employees in a company cannot tell you their own strategy. If they don't know the strategy, how can they execute it? So even though it's common sense, it's not common practice. Under create awareness, there are 2 main themes. You have to gain engagement and you have to get communication. And later on, we're going to talk a little bit about engagement. And the key message for communication is it's not about just launching a strategy, it's about nurturing your strategy communications. You have to nurture it over time. The second main theme that we saw consistent across successful organizations is building excellence. Once you create that awareness, you then build on it. And this involves looking at your culture, your business model, again, the communications, because it's constant, the measurement and tracking, and synergizing the way you work. Because when you change your strategy, it means you're changing the way you work. So you have to look at the way people are working together. And the model, the Jenga style model, is because you have to find the right fit, and it's not easy to do. If it was easy, 2/3 wouldn't fail. And the third key area is follow through. You need to constantly follow through on the right actions that people are taking, and also reviewing the progress of the implementation. So earlier, someone commented that the reason implementation is so tough is because it just keeps going. But if you constantly review, you can set measures, targets, and deadlines and make sure they're completed against those targets. So the 3 areas combined, when you create awareness, build excellence, and follow through, allows you to translate the strategy into the organization.
Just a quick question here, Robin. When you say, one of the, I think Balaji says it just never seems to complete. In your experience, the 1/3 that are successful, do they in the follow through consciously decide to stop doing the old ways? Instead of just lapping on new and new and new initiatives, do they consciously stop the old ways, like, put some things down instead of just adding on?
That's a great question. No, it's the latter. They add on, but they also keep doing it the old way. So people have more and more to do. So yeah, one of the practical tips we share is we ask people to identify what should you stop doing? What is no longer adding value to the new way of working? So it's just as important to have a stop list as a to start list.
Right. That's a great point. Yeah, thank you.
So just closing out on the 3 broad themes, we tend to see that it's very unstructured, the way people try and execute. When you adopt the 3 broad themes, it gives you the structure. And in the book, I go into detail. Part 2 of the book goes into the tools and the tips of how you create awareness, build excellence, and follow through to take the strategy to the ground level.
Yeah. So So in this, right, you kind of like give us the framework, and that's the big skeleton on how we can implement strategies. And of course, the key aspects is people, right? People are the ones implementing the strategy. So how do you engage people in executing strategy, especially when Kay mentions that people are resistant to change because they're not sure if the strategy would work, whether it would be worthwhile. Yeah, what's your advice on this?
Okay, so I will share my views, and then I know you also do a lot of work in this area, Wendy. So let's hear from you as well. So first of all, the challenge is that when you create awareness, one of the biggest challenges before you, part of engagement, one of the initial steps is you have to get people's share of mind. What do I mean? In advertising, people are focusing on share of market. In banking, we use the term share of wallet. In online advertising, it's share of voice. But in execution, you want to get people's share of mind. You want to get them thinking about the new strategy. And there's a term that I introduced in excellence in execution called over the wall. Now, what does this mean? When you start to launch your strategy, people are sitting on the left-hand side of the wall, and all they see is a wall. But the leaders are on the other side, and they can see the future in front of them, the new direction from the new strategy. And the challenge is, before you get people engaged, is you have to shift them from their current thinking to their new way of thinking. And when you get share of mind, you start to take them over the wall. So just a couple of key tips we find that works very well. First thing is, don't tell people the strategy. Now, what do I mean? Tease people into the new direction. Give them a teaser, but don't actually give them the answer. We know from research that people are more engaged when they reach a conclusion on their own rather than being told. So for example, just this year, we launched a strategy with a company in Thailand who work globally, and we used a space theme about lifting off to a new planet, but we didn't tell them what the new strategy was. We showed them images that created the new picture over a few weeks. Then we launched the new strategy very successfully. So first, tease people into it. And the second tip I'm going to share that I see is a big mistake among many leaders is you have to explain the why we're going to change before you ask them to change. Take time to make sure people know why we should change. Give them the reasons, both from the heart, so it's emotional, and from the mind, so it's logical. And you help people over the wall. And the goal, of course, is to inspire them, to get them excited and engaged. Actually, before I go to one more tip, Wendy, I'll share one more tip, then I'll bring yourself in. So one more tip on how to get people over the wall. When you communicate to your bosses upwards in the organization, use more facts. But when you communicate downwards to get more engagement, use more stories than facts. So just a quick tip to help people communicate. But Wendy, I know you do a lot of work here, so please share with us your view.
Yeah, thank you, Robin. So, in having people to be involved in implementing the change, we find that to deal with the change fatigue, the level of connection people feel to the organization, to their work, to their managers, to their team members is really important, right? That determines why they stay in the organization. And when we say stay, it's not just the physical body staying, but also your heart and your mind is engaged as well. So these are some of the key factors why people stay in organizations, right? About exciting work. So if it's a new strategy, and how is it exciting and challenging to your staff, right? And through the new strategy implementation, how does the management, how does the leaders support people in the change, right? Recognize and value people for trying new things, right? And in implementing the new strategy, how is it a learning and development opportunity? How does it help them grow their skill sets and grow their career, right? So these are some of the key factors why people stay, and then the others are some of the other stay factors, right? Yeah, and so one of the things that we find is that, while we have these big strategy, and then trying to bring it down to everyday operations, is that engagement is one-to-one, right? So one-to-one meaning like, look at it from engaging that single employee, that one-on-one conversation that really is important to understand what's going on in their minds, right? How are they reacting to the new strategy? Are they concerned about their stability in their job, their security? Are they concerned about their skills? Do they have the confidence to do it? So some of these A to Z strategies of engagement are conversations that help leaders help leaders have these conversations with their people. And this work is based on the book Love Them or Lose Them, which is a research based on 17,000 people worldwide on what
Right.
keeps people engaged at work. Yeah, so just some additional ideas around the how do leaders engage their staff.
All right. Good on you for sharing. Thanks, Wendy.
Yeah, yeah, and I think then that comes to the next point here. And just before we go to this next one, I just want to encourage you, if you got any comments, any reactions to what Robin is saying along the way, please feel free to just put it into the chat box. If you agree, if you disagree, if you've got questions, just let us know, okay? Yeah, and so when we talk about engagement, right, some people think that we need to involve our staff in crafting strategy, right? And because we all have different data points, especially in today's disruptive world, that leaders may not have all the information. Right? On the other hand, if we involve the entire organization, it's going to be very time consuming, and whether we can necessarily have consensus is a key issue. So to this question, right? Should we include our employees in crafting the strategy? Okay, maybe just before we get Robin to share his thoughts, I'd like to also invite all of you to put in your views, right? Should we or should we not should we or should we not? Okay, hang on a minute. I'm just going to relaunch.
Yep, it's there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So should we involve employees in crafting strategy? What do you all think? Oh, 3 says yes. Straight away. Any more responses? Okay. Yeah, I think we should have a few more responses. Okay, yeah, one more just came in. Any? Yeah. Yeah, just indicate yes or no. Wow, it looks like it's overwhelming. Okay,
Yep.
so Balaji says yes, and K says to different degrees, right? So it's not a yes or no response. Okay, so I'm gonna end the poll and share the results with you. Okay, so everybody says yes, we should involve employees in crafting strategy. Right? What do you think, Robin?
So, so it's interesting to see the results and how fast everyone said yes. So let me share with you that there are 2 schools of thought. And the 2 schools of thought are, 1, It's a leader's responsibility to craft the strategy and ensure it's executed. After all, that's why they're paid the big bucks to lead the company into the future. So one school of thought says, hey, it's our responsibility. It's a leader's job to get it done, and we shouldn't be dependent on the people. The second school of thought says, to ensure engagement and participation from people and leaders, we should give people a voice early on in the crafting of the strategy. And when you include your employees in the planning, their willingness, commitment, creativity, and responsibility is higher than when you don't. So as Wendy's question said, is it one or two? Who's right? Well, in true consultancy fashion, oh, sorry, and I forgot, I added Mark Zuckerberg's view. Mr. Zuckerberg says, when you give everyone a voice and give people power, the system usually ends up in a really good place. So most people think yes, but the answer, it does depend. It depends on the culture, the environment, and the business situation. So let me explain. If possible, I agree. It's good to get people involved early on, but it's not always possible. When you're moving at a fast strategy cadence is a term that means the speed of your execution. When you have to execute very quickly, and you don't have time, and we've got to move fast, and we're losing market share, and we've got to get going, we have people engaged, we don't have the luxury to say to employees, what do you think? When that's happening, you just have to get going and develop the strategy and implement. Where possible, I agree with our poll, if it's a slow speed of execution, a slow strategy cadence, and you have time to do focus groups and testing and analyzing, then I fully agree. It's wonderful to engage your people earlier on so that you get engagement in the execution.
Yeah. You know, on this sounds like if there is time, then we'll engage our people. If there's no time, sorry, we just have to do it. Yeah, and I'm curious also, like sometimes the implementation slows down because people are not, people don't buy in, or they disagree, or they don't have faith, or they don't understand why. So is it possible that in a fast strategy cadence situation, we sometimes need to go slow in order to go fast?
If possible, yes, but normally you don't have that luxury. A fast strategy cadence is where the environment and your strategy are moving very quickly, and it's more about being very responsive, reacting very quickly. So you don't have the luxury. You just have to make decisions. You have to move forward. You try by doing. So it's in a very unique, I mean, to think about it, to put it into context, just think of, some of the technology, the digital transformation that's going on at the moment. For banking especially, they don't have the luxury of waiting and seeing. They have to be adopting digital as one of the platforms for their customers, or they'll start losing market share, customers, shareholder value. So they have to get going. So it very much depends on your strategy and your environment. And it would be nice to slow down, but during that time, you really don't have the luxury, Wendy.
Sure, understand. Yeah, Balaji says, if there is no time, is it strategy or more a tactical response? So, yeah, I guess he's asking if there is a no time situation, are we really more, is it a strategy change or is it more a tactical change?
Yeah, Balaji, yeah, great question. In Inside Excellence and Execution, where I talk about this in more detail, I fully agree with you. There's a view that says, some people even say, when you're working in a fast cadence, strategy is dead. you're absolutely right. It's all about tactical. And some people don't even have a view on strategy. They just say, move on, respond as quickly as possible. Very fair point. Fully agree. Wendy, you gave them a teaser of the final question. Shall we take them to the final question?
Oh, just before we get there, Mins also says her view is it depends on the size of the organization and to a certain extent the size of the strategy, in terms of whether we should involve people.
Yeah, so the size of the strategy is dependent on, strategy depends on how aggressive you're being into the market and what you're looking to achieve, which is very much dictated by your environment, your competition, what's happening. So the two biggest factors that impact the design of a strategy speed will be the competitiveness of the strategy and the environment you're working in. So just to give another example, if one of my clients works in the agricultural industry selling seeds to farmers across the world, and whenever I talk to the leadership team, they're always, it's okay, Robin. We're going to get there. There's no rush. And they have the luxury because their industry changes very slowly and they have like 10, 15 years to get things done. So for them, it's very slow. They can take their time. So it does very much depend on the strategy and the environment.
Yeah, compared to places like Grab and Uber that changes so quickly.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So.
Yeah, let's not go there. Okay, so we're on the final question of the webinar, and thank you to everyone for joining. A couple of you know me, so you'll have heard me use this before. So those who haven't, the question is, just to summarize the big challenge of strategy execution. And the question is, 5 birds sit on a fence, 3 decide to leave, how many birds are left on the fence? So one more time, 5 birds sit on a fence, 3 decide to leave, how many are left on the fence?
Okay, so everybody type your response on the chat. Balaji says 0, Babe says 0. What about the rest of you? Mins or Kay or Erwin or Michael? 2, 5, depending on the leader. Right, that's from Kay.
So, just so we can finish on time, let me give you the answer. 5 birds sit on a fence, 3 decide to leave. How many are left on the fence? 5. Why 5? Because they thought about it. They even had a webinar to discuss how to get to the other side of the fence. They had a conference call on the first Monday of every month to discuss what to do to get to the other side of the fence, but they didn't take the right actions. So 5 are left on the fence because implementation is all about taking the right actions. And I say the right action because everyone is busy every day, but are we adding value to the long-term strategy? So the 3, the create awareness, the build excellence, follow through, help you articulate what are the right actions that we need to take today to deliver the long-term strategy. And the 5 birds are talking about it, but they never get going.
That sounds like we should not just be listening to the webinar, but we should read the book and identify what are the right actions we need to take, right?
Well, on that note, and thank you for mentioning it. Let me just see if I can move the slide forward.
Okay, so Kay says the action that needs to be taken is to read the book. Yes. Well, that's the first step, right? And then to find out more specific actions in your organization.
Well, Kay, as I said, I spent 3 years writing the book, and I'm very passionate about it. Fortunately, it's selling extremely well. Just because I'm, being on execution, I want to make sure we start and finish on time. Wendy, just allow me a second to share. A few people already know about the resource. If you would like more information about implementation, I host a site called the implementation-hub.com. So the portal name's not actually up there, but it's implementation-hub.com. And this has over 500 resources on implementation, videos, case studies, tools, white papers, case studies that you can use. So please do feel free to visit that. And if you would, Kay, like a copy of the book, the website is excellenceandexecutionbook.com. All one word, excellenceandexecutionbook.com. You can see it at the bottom there.
Yeah. Do you want to bring us to the last slide?
Yep. And, you know, Wendy and I are very passionate about what we do in terms of supporting. So, you know, anyone who would like any further information, you can see the contact details there. Wendy, you've done a great job this afternoon hosting and initiating the webinar. So on behalf of everyone, thank you for your hosting.
No, I want to say thank you for spending 3 years writing the book and sharing your passion with implementation and getting us to take action. Right, so I have started reading the book, and and if anybody has any comments, any questions, feel free to just add it in, and we can come back to you, look back to you after the webinar as well. Okay, so I want to say, can we give Robin a round of applause for doing this webinar and sharing?
Before we hang up, just to let everyone know that both our books, if you don't mind holding them both up, because you went into the local bookstore in Singapore and they were actually right next to each other. So your new book is called?
My book is Wholeness in a Disruptive World. I think we need to be whole to implement strategies on a high cadence.
All right.
Okay, so on that note, I want to say thank you to Robin. Thank you to all of you for spending the hour with us. I hope we have been useful for you, right? And we can stay in touch.
All the best.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I think, you've got you come across very natural.